How about if I unmute the microphone? Anyway, welcome to season 5 of This, That, and the Other. I'm your host, Magic, and this is episode 1 of season 5. And just kind of let you have some insight as to what we're going to try to do this year. We are going to focus a bit more on some of the newer folks that are coming on board. We're also going to try to develop some of the understanding that a variety of coaches have regarding the game and kind of whittle that down to a more realistic understanding of what actually goes on in the game. And what I mean by that is there are some nuances in the game that some folks believe happen a certain way or go a certain way. And there's a variety of theories or impressions. And there are some coaches who have actually done some trial and experimentation and have arrived at a definitive answer regarding some of those questions. And we'll get into those throughout the course of the season. But this is to say that we're going to do some newbie stuff today. And again, as I've said in the past, newbie is not derogatory. It is an affectionate term that we use for the new players that join us here on What If Sports Gridiron Dynasty. We were all newbies at one time or the other. So that's the initiation into this game that is so addictive and it has so much potential. And that's a whole nother show regarding the potential. And as far as updates to the game go, we've reached out to the WISGD staff, the WIS staff, and we're going to get an update in the coming weeks. Hopefully there's some information that folks will be looking forward to hearing, and hopefully it'll be good information. We'll just have to wait and see. But so today we've got some newbies on, and I'm going to bring the first one on, and that is, hopefully I'm saying this right, Chrundle. Did I say that right?
Not technically. It's a reference to the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh, okay. And my wife loves that show.
Trundle.
Trundle, yeah. You would think I would know that. I mean, I even took a trip out to LA with her, and we went by the building that's actually in LA that they use for the exterior shots for that show. So nice. Anyway, Trundle, welcome aboard. And we've got some other folks in the green room, as we say, that are coming on with us here momentarily. But go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, who you are, where you're from, anything you're willing to share.
All right, well, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's my first season in this. I live in Toronto, Canada. Basically, the goal of this is I play a lot of fantasy football. I'm pretty good at that, but then the off season happens and I have nothing to do football related. And I've looked into games like front office football and some other things, and nothing seemed good. Let's say that. Everything seemed to have some sort of flaw with it. And the goal was to get some of the people in our fantasy league together and do something in the off season. So I thought this looked like an interesting way to get people together. I'm sure there are pros and cons to it, but so far it's looking good. And also teach us along the way some of the things that we may not learn about from fantasy football, because while we're in like IDP leagues and stuff and know that sort of thing, you know, all this play calling completely new to me, and it's going to add as I learn about this, a whole new element to the game when I'm watching football. And right now, you know, you get announcers saying something, I'm like, this is all meaningless to me until I hear you passed it to AJ Brown. All right, good work, AJ.
Well, that's one thing that a lot of guys and gals, we do have quite a few ladies on the platform, but a lot of folks have come into this primarily the same way you did. You know, the regular football season ends, and now what do we do for football junkies? And this kind of fills that crack, so to say. Now, the other thing too is this show actually ended in August or September, I believe it was, because I was busy doing some Arkansas high school football stuff. Just didn't have a whole bunch of time to dedicate to a lot of things I had going on. So the show took a hiatus. So this is the first episode of season 5. We're back, and just in time. Football season is over.
All right.
There's football season is over for college and high school. So we've got a little bit of pro ball left, but you'd mentioned the play calling aspect. You're in D3, and when you get to D2, it's going to be like opening up the water hose. You're just going to have to drink real fast and learn very quickly. But the good thing is there's a lot of folks out here who've gone that way. We all have, and we've all learned, and we're all eager to help and ready to help, and hopefully make this an enjoyable experience for all the new folks that come on. But you'll hear me say it, and I've said it before. Get out of D3 as fast as you can, unless for some reason you really enjoy being there, because D3 is really not the game that so many people are enjoying. Once you get up to D2 and above, that there's so many details, so many different things that you can actually control or manipulate or try and experiment to get the desired outcome. And the one thing you have to be careful of is that frustration level that sets in. We've all experienced it, to where it's like, man, I would have sworn that this would have done A, B, C, or, this would have solved X, or whatever the case may be. And that's just not the case. We have to keep in mind this is a computer-based game, and it is X's and O's that translates to, ones and zeros. And, if you take away some of the realistic coaching mentality and put more of a statistician and a computer expert mentality to it, I think you'll find that there's a happy medium where you can get both of those passions involved and have a good outcome. Understand you brought a couple, 7 or 8 other guys with you from the league. Is that correct? I know I've emailed some. I don't have their names with me.
No, I mean, I wish they came for questions, but they apparently just, they're off doing their own thing tonight. But I thought I'd come anyway. But yeah, I think there's 8 or 9 people that all join the same league. So a lot of the humans now know each other. In terms of the new people who came in as a group,
Right.
We have a few people who are ranked already because they took good teams to start.
There you go.
I did not do that. I took a stupid path and took some bad team and decided to, try to do something with that. You're mentioning like the differences between D3 and D2, and what's fascinating to me so far is I think it makes sense having like a limited, easy option to get you into things. But to your point, there are certain things that are clearly missing. Like when you can choose your play calling on 4th down, it's like, do you want to run or pass? I'm like, I don't know. Is it 4th and 1 or is it 4th and 15?
Yeah,
that makes
exactly.
a world of difference.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of similarities from D3 that you'll find all the way up to D1. And your roster, you have to recruit 50 players. You have to field a team of 50 players. The recruiting aspect is relatively the same. You've got the playoff system that's all the way up through D1 now. It used to just be the bowls at D1, and now there's playoff systems there. So there are some things that do stay the same. But when you get down into the weeds or the nuts and bolts, that's when you really get a better understanding of what all is going on. And, right now, and this is kind of the way that I vision it, is right now at D3, the coach is more like a coach at a college team. He kind of oversees everything, but really isn't too heavily involved in anything. And that's kind of the way the human interaction is at D3. Once you get at D2 and above, essentially now you've got an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator, recruiting coordinator, all those different things, but it's still you. It's still that one person. So you really do increase your workload, but at the same time, hopefully you're increasing your joy as well. Let's bring on Mr. M. Pruden, 26. He doesn't have a camera on. Hopefully he does, but let's see. Is he available? Are you there? We got a muted mic, kind of like we had at the start of the show. Well, I'll leave him up, and when he's available for video or audio, he can just pop right on in. But what is the thing that most people get frustrated with early on is the lack of results based on the expected results based on the input. So, a lot of times we say, well, if I do this, then the expected result is going to be this, and the actual result is going to be pretty close. The reality is at D3, you do not have that much control to get close to the expected results in a consistent fashion. And you were talking about the fourth down situation. There are situations when it's late in the ball game and you're behind or ahead. You want to do certain things that you necessarily can't do at D3 that you can at D2 and above. But over the course of the season, we'll definitely get into a lot of the nitty gritty, so to speak. But for our first Q&A, what is the one thing that you find that you're having to really struggle with now that you've actually gotten the season underway?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would say struggle necessarily, but could I use some more information on? I mean, I spent way too much time browsing the forums already, so I've already learned a lot more than I think many people would have, which is a good start. But I think because in D3, to your point, you can't control that much in terms of game outcomes. So when I play some ranked team and I lose like 50-0, I'm like, yep, fine, that's gonna happen. And
Yeah,
the goal is to get better. And if the goal is to get better, I think where I want to focus on is player development more than anything, so
correct.
that I am having a better chance. I know you say move to D2, so maybe it doesn't even matter. But hypothetically, were I to stay in D3, I'd like to see the players get better so that my team can improve. And I guess my first question is how much will additional playing time help prospects develop over practice alone? Because there's always these sort of situations where I'm wondering, do you play the slightly better, more senior player who doesn't have as high ceiling but could probably do a little better now? Or do you play the younger guy who has a higher ceiling but isn't going to have as many results in the hope of getting more development for that player in future years?
Well, I'll preface what I'm about to say and anything going forward with this is my opinion. This there are quite a few guys out there that just wax me every time we play. I've got no chance, no matter how good of a team I've got. They have this mojo, this you know definitive understanding of the game and can manipulate it to their satisfaction. So I'm not there. I'm not in that elite group of those coaches. So I've got about 15 years on the platform. It's evolved from the game that I originally joined to where it is now, and there's been some big changes, big improvements. But as it stands right now, the game that we play today, it's not fixed in a preset one method fits everybody. Is kind of what I'm trying to say. You and I could have the same team and achieve different outcomes at the end of the season just because of some of the things we do throughout the season. You mentioned roster makeup. Do you play the senior guy? Do you play the junior guy that maybe's got more work ethic and hopefully improve? Well, all of that evolves into the basic understanding of depends. It depends. What do you want to do with that team that year? If you want that team to be successful, and success being measured by wins, then what I would suggest is play those players that are going to get you those wins today, because that's important when we speak about vision. And vision, of course, is the quality of recruits you can see during your recruiting search after the season has rolled over. And it's important to focus on the fact that it's after the season has rolled over. And that rollover occurs when the previous season's records are wiped out and you now show how many recruits you have to fill scholarships for and your budget on your recruiting page. Prior to that happening, you will see, the scores and results from, we'll call it the current year, and then rollover happens about 3 or 4 days, I think it is, after the season stops. And now that rollover zeroes everything. Well, now the computer system takes into account I believe it's the previous 3 seasons and the amount of wins that you've had in those 3 seasons. So if you're with a team that's got a 9-win season, a 4-win season, a 5-win season, you don't even break 20 yet for a total win total. So you're not even at 20, and you really don't get to see the good recruits until you've hit 30. 30 wins over a 3-year period is a double-digit win average every season. So you've got to have a really good team. Once you start to see the upper echelon players in your division that you can actually recruit, that happens about the time you start hitting 42, 43 wins over a 3-year period total. So now we're talking a team that consistently makes a deep playoff run. Now, the one caveat that I was recently advised of is your national championships and conference championships that come along with those wins tend to bolster that vision a little bit as well. So although you may not have, 32 or 33 wins, whatever the case may be, if you've got a conference championship in that recent history, then it's going to open up the door for you to see better recruits. Now, that is important because, again, we're talking about D3, where the prime ingredient to a successful team is quality players. There's some coaches out there that can game plan victories with roster manipulation and game planning because they know the intricate details of the game. They can win with subpar players. But for the most of us, and I'm including myself in that group, we really need some quality players in order to pull in wins on a consistent basis. So if you're wanting to stay at a school and you're wanting to achieve a dynasty at that school, then you want to go ahead and get the wins as early as possible so that you can get that vision increase, so you can start recruiting those better players, so you can make the deep playoff runs every year. On the flip side of that, if you want to go from D3 to D2 immediately, well, you can do that regardless of what your record is at D3. Automatically, the next year you can move up to D2. But if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've done it, but your success in that single season will kind of set the bar as to what team you can be qualified for at the next level. And if I'm wrong on that, I'm sure somebody will let me know on the boards or via site mail, and I'll appreciate that. But my understanding is that the more successful you are in your seasons at D3 or singular season at D3, the better you have a chance of landing a upper echelon team in D2. That's important because, again, it boils down to I want to win again, and I want to build a team and get that dynasty. So you're looking for a way to win, and taking over a team that's at the bottom of the barrel is going to take you 4 or 5 years possibly before you can see some of those top quality recruits that we're talking about. So it really puts you behind the power curve. So when moving from D3 to D2, even if you want to stay at D2, I nested at D2 forever. I think I've still got some teams there. But if you want to be competitive, as quickly as possible at D2, you want to get those teams who've had a history of 35, 40 type wins in the last 3 years, because those are the teams that are going to see those major recruits and give you an opportunity to really land some studs versus taking over a team that's 0-13, 3-10, 4-9. You're going to see the bottom of the barrel, and you're going to struggle, and you're going to be frustrated and trying to move up to where you get that additional 2 or 3 wins a year until you can actually accumulate 30, 35, 40 over a 3-year period. So in order to get those wins, do you play the senior guy, or do you play the guy that has the better potential with the higher work ethic? Well, my take on that is, if you're only going to be there for a year, to hell with the guy with potential and work ethic. I'm playing the guy that's going to get me those wins, like I said at the onset. That guy with potential, that guy with work ethic, is he really going to help you that first year? And if your team is so bad that a freshman is going to be a stud on your team, get the hell out of D3 is all I can say. Get rid of that team. It's not going to be very good. So it all depends on what you want to do. If you want to stay at D3 and you want to, and you've already got a good team at D3, and that's the other aspect. When you join D3, you could potentially take over a team that's won 40 games in the last 3 years. So you're already going to see those upper echelon recruits. So now the wins may possibly come anyway, regardless of who you're playing, because you've got an overall good squad of talent that can fill in. You've got a really good bench. You're going to win a bunch of games, even as a newbie, just based on talent and, luck of the draw, as you will. So in that case, I may play a freshman who's got good potential, good work ethic, over a senior that is just a couple more core points ahead of him, but he's probably tapped out as a senior. He's not going to get that much better. I want that freshman to evolve if I'm going to stay there.
So I guess, I mean, that's a lot of great information about vision and that sort of thing. I'm hoping that you might be able to quantify, maybe if possible, but like if you were to put a player in the lineup versus not, the development that they'll see as a result of being in the lineup.
Yeah. There is nothing that I'm aware of that quantifies just how much growth a player will receive from practice and or playing time. However, what I have discovered and what others have discovered to be beneficial is get your freshmen as much playing time as possible. And there's a way to do that at D2 and above that you really can't do at D3, and that comes with a depth chart. You've got a means at D2 and above to use what I call the default depth chart, where I have my freshmen, and in certain parts of the game, when I'm winning by 20 or 30 or losing by 20 or 30, in the second quarter or the fourth quarter, I get those freshmen in the ball game to get them some playing time, which makes them happy. And then they begin to develop. Now, how much they develop, again, depends on their work ethic, their potential. And there's a good little chart, I don't know if you've seen it or not, about the cylinders for work ethic and potential. And for those who may not be familiar with it, let me see if I can pull it up while we're talking here. Just, I'm all by myself, so you have to forgive me here. There's the work ethic. The top little area indicates the actual work ethic that an individual player has, and then his potential cylinders. And kind of the way that I've spoken on this in the past is, your very low player, that's as big as his cylinder is going to get. Now, how much work ethic he has will identify how fast that cylinder fills up. If he's got high work ethic, he may fill up that cylinder by the time he's a sophomore and really not grow very much more, if any at all. But you're a very high player, even with a low work ethic, he's going to increase steady year after year after year until he fills that up. Now, if he's got a very low work ethic, he may not fill that up all the way. So that's why it's key to increase that work ethic. And the way you increase that work ethic is, one, playing time. And two, there are opportunities where you can actually change a player in his position, and it increases his work ethic in doing so. And the inverse happens as well, where you can change a player's position and his work ethic drops to, through the basement. And that's for a whole nother show. We've got a great deal of information on changing players and who fits where well and all that. But suffice it to say, these are your cylinders for your potentials, and your work ethic basically dictates how fast they fill up. So a prime example would be, let's say you've got a very high player with a 10 work ethic. God forbid you ever had somebody on your team with a 10 work ethic, but let's say you do. His work ethic would grow his potential would be fulfilled very slowly, understandably so. Now, let's say you had an average player, but he had a 50 work ethic. Well, you could see that, if there were a bar on the average cylinder and the very high cylinder, that bar would be rising much faster for the average player than it would for the very high player, because the average has 50 work ethic, the very high has 10. So that average player would actually have greater core increase in the immediate years until he maxes out. And it'd be about that time that your very high player would soon catch up and surpass him, come the junior year or senior year, even though he's got slower growth because of that reduced work ethic. So that's a situation where, do you want to play your average guy or your very high guy? Well, what is your goal? If your goal is to win today, then I'm playing the average guy because he's going to have better cores. He's going to provide me with a better chance of success. But if you're going to groom that very high player and stay with that team, get him as much playing time as possible, increase that work ethic so that he grows at a much faster rate. Now, how much all of that can be quantified, again, I don't think anybody knows. It's just a warm fuzzy that you get when you see it happen and you recognize that the things you're doing are producing results. And the one way you can do that is on your team page where you see your roster, your office, and your formations at the header. You can click on your formations and scroll down to the very bottom, and you can see how those are growing each year for each player. The formation IQ. The same thing can be said for an individual's core values. You go to the team page again and look at your, I want to say depth chart, but it's just your roster essentially. And you see the breakouts, all the positions and the players that are filling those positions. And you go down to the bottom and you can see where they're growing in various cores. Is his work ethic going up? Yeah, you've played 10 games this year. His work ethic has gone up 8 points. So whatever you're doing is working because he's getting some substantial growth. Now, speaking on that, at D3, I mentioned early on, it's all about quality of player. So your formation IQ, again, it's my opinion, really doesn't matter. That's where you reduce your fumbles. You tend to have better overall formation success with the higher formation IQ. But a team that's got sucky players with great formation IQ is going to get drubbed by a team that has sucky formation IQ with studs. It happens. I've seen it happen. I've watched it happen. So I put more value on individual practice time rather than team practice time. I want those individuals to grow because at D3, it's about the studs. So you get those individuals as much practice time. And the caveat here is who knows how much is max practice time. It's always been said that at a certain point, you reach a pinnacle of diminished returns. I try not to put anything more than 25 minutes on any particular position when it comes to practice time at D3. So the other thing I don't do is when it comes to the formations, I stick, generally speaking, with one formation on offense, one formation on defense. I recruit for those formations and I play those formations. It's a tough job to recruit when you're trying to run a wishbone, a shotgun, and the Notre Dame box. Each of those rosters has a different makeup, and each of those formations have a different roster makeup. And it's just hard to really fill out a successful roster when you're trying to fit those particular people into those grooves for those particular formations. I find it easier for me to recruit for a specific formation on offense and defense. So I'll throw 25 minutes into each of those and then 25 minutes into special teams. The rest I'll dump into team practice. Now, if I'm taking over a team that's already got a very high formation IQ, that's where you get your team practice. Formation IQ, even though it may not be the formation I want to run, for the purpose of having a successful year, I'll stick with that particular formation and play that formation that year and that formation only because I'm moving on the following year. And a lot of people will do that at D3. They'll take what's already a high point regarding the formations and go with it. And if you're taking over a team that's a sim-AI team forever and ever and ever, you're going to see that your pro set, I think it's your wishbone and your trips. There's usually those three formations on offense that are equally balanced across. That's just the way the sim does it. So over a period of time, it's understandable that those are going to be the ones that are going to work for you. But to quantify how much growth, it's going to be a trial and error thing for you to where you're seeing the success that you can get based on the input that you're putting forth. So I would recommend tinker. There's nothing wrong with tinkering with your practice time. There's nothing wrong with moving your freshman in above a senior for, the first half and then swapping it out for the second half just to get each of them a little bit of quality playing time. 35% is the general rule for an accepted level to count as a start. So what I mean by that is not 35% on the year. It's generally 35% every game. So if you've got a freshman and he's getting 34%, a couple games down the road, you're going to get a letter saying, especially if you promised him a start. Let me preface that. If you promised him a freshman start or, X number of percentage playing time and he doesn't receive that, you're going to get that nasty gram. Coach, I thought you're a man of your word. When are you going to, start me? Well, just because he's in on the first play of the game doesn't qualify as a start. He's got to see at least 35% is the rough figure. The downside to that is, and you're going to find out there's always downsides to all this stuff. The downside to that is no two players are the same when it comes to their satisfaction threshold on their expectations. You got recruit A and recruit B. You promise them 35% playing time. Well, you look at the playing time, the first 3 games of the season, and each of them have 34%. One of them bitches, the other one doesn't. What the hell? What is sports? Where's your consistency here? Well, you will find in your scouting notes, when you scout these players, there'll be a line in there from your assistant coach, something about this guy's a team player, or this guy's all about himself, or this guy's selfish. Those selfish guys, those guys that are all about themselves, they are the ones that are going to bitch as soon as they don't get exactly what you promised them. The guy who is a team player or who cares more about others than just himself, he may be satisfied getting 33%. He perceives that as qualifying as a start, even though the start indicator doesn't give him credit for it. He's not going to bitch. So you have to be aware that not all players are going to react the same way to playing time when it comes to promised starts or promised playing times. So don't freak out if you get a message and you look and this guy's, he's showing an overall for the season at 38%, but there are 2 games where he only got 26% or whatever the case may be. Those are the ones he's going to gripe about. And usually right as that last game in that string of sub 35 happens is when you'll get that notification. So that happens.
I definitely think that's interesting information about what's considered a start, because one of the things that confused me just in the first few games was seeing after a game, it was like, how did I have 18 people on defense start? This feels like
exactly. Exactly. And that is one of the things that really good coaches have learned is that you can get more starts because of that 35% ratio or level than are actually starting on the field. Like you said, how do you get 18 players starting on defense? The benefit to that and the good thing is when you're at D2 and above, you can manipulate that depth chart, as we mentioned earlier on, so that you're getting as many people in the game as possible. For instance, you can put your roster or your playing percentage or your substitution rate. You can put your substitution rate at 95%, and those guys are going to be rolling in and out, in and out, in and out. Now, here's another one of those caveats. If you've got, let's say, 10 linebackers, and you're playing a 5-2 defense, at 95%, there's probably only going to be 4, maybe 5 of those guys that see the field, even at that substitution rate throughout the game. But now flip it over, and let's say you're running a 4-4. Well, those 4 starters are going to sub out. So now instead of getting 4, 5, 6 guys maybe in the game at linebacker, you're getting 8 or 10 into the game as linebacker. So now you can actually look at your roster and see that, holy moly, I've got 10 linebackers and all of them are getting 34, 35, 36% playing time. They're all getting starts. They're all happy. Their work ethic will grow. Their work ethic as freshmen will grow much quicker than their work ethic as seniors, because at that level, they've already kind of begin to tap out. And you'll see that as a senior, a guy getting 40% playing time will not be as happy as a freshman getting 40% playing time because of those expectations. Your senior expects, I'm a senior, I should be playing more. And your freshman's like, holy crap, I'm a freshman. I shouldn't even be on the field, and I'm getting 40% playing time. Man, I am happy. Mama, look at what I'm doing. So that work ethic will grow. Now, that same player, when he's a senior, he's going to go, what do you mean 40% playing time? I was getting that crap as a freshman. Come on, coach, give me 60 or 70, or I'm not going to be very happy. And if he's not happy, his work ethic decreases, which is understandable. So that caveat into the whole substitution rate of being able to adjust it from 60% up to 95% is how you can manipulate the substitution rate for your players in the course of the game. And then that depth chart and how you script the playbook to use in the game plan for that default setting, if you will, the one that I use and manipulate. That's how you can get those freshmen a lot of playing time in that second and fourth quarter by manipulating your game situation that you'll see at D2 and above.
So based on what you're just saying, it came to mind an interesting strategy in D3, because as you're saying, we can't change the playbooks in D3. I get that. But we do have access to substitution rates. And it seems to me you can sort of manipulate those a little bit. So when you're playing one of the ranked teams and you want to perform better, increase your rankings overall, maybe lower the substitution
exactly
lower
yes.
so that you keep your better starters in against them. But then if you're playing some garbage team at that point, just set it at 95%, get everyone starts at that point.
Yeah, but the other thing too, here's another one of those caveats. Let's take the situation where you're playing a good team and you really want to show out well on the field and make it a competitive game. And like you indicated, I want to keep my starters in the game because those are the better players. Now let's take a core value defensive lineman. Let's say he's got an overall core value based on his strength, tackling, game instinct, technique. We manipulate those numbers to how we like, and now we come up with our core rating that we want our defensive lineman to have. And this particular defensive lineman A has a core value that makes him a starter, and that core value is 55. Okay, we're at 50, 55. Happy. The defense we're running is a 3-4. So now we got three defensive linemen. We got a 55, a 54, and let's say a 50. Now, our first substitute off the bench comes in at a whopping 40. Okay, if you're playing your starters at 90, 85%, when they get substituted, they will still more than likely be at a level where their core value is greater than the guy coming in for them, even at a diminished rate of 95 or maybe even 90%. Now, let's say that you've got a three-man front, you're running a 3-4 defense. You've got that 55, 54, 50, whatever the case may be. But now the first guy off your bench is also 50, and the guy behind him is a 50, and the guy behind him is a 49. Well, now when your starter gets down to about 90%, his core value is less than the sub that's going to be coming into the game, and that's what you're going to want. Yep. So that's where you have to kind of look at the math and figure out at what level you want individuals to come into the ball game in order to provide you with the overall best core for that position group that is on the field. And that's particularly important at D3 because the defensive line is weighted as a group, just like the offensive line is. You know, if you've got, let's say you had 50 for the first two defensive linemen, you know, that gives you an overall 100 divided by those two, that's 50 apiece. I mean, that's simple math. That's what we just arrived at. But now let's say that your third defensive lineman that you've got starting is a 20. Well, now you went from having an average of, 55, 54, 50, which would have given you 109, 159 divided by 3. you're looking at roughly a 52, somewhere in that area of an average. But now let's say that your defensive line is 50, 50, 20. Now you've got 120 divided by 3. You're looking at 40. So you've lost, an average of 10 core points per player for that position group. So you want to keep that grouping core value as high as possible, and that's where you get your manipulation of that substitution rate, so that they can come in and come out when you want them to. And like you said, if it's a game that you're going to get wiped out or you're going to kick some butt, does it really matter if you've got a low core rate for your defensive lineman when the overall success of the team is pretty much guaranteeing a win? Throw those freshmen in there. To hell with the matchups. Get those freshmen playing time. But at the same time, make sure you get the upperclassmen some playing time as well if you're going to stay with this team and want everybody to grow. Because the point is, happiness, increases work ethic. And I don't know how much more we can say about that, but it's just a given fact that, keep the players happy and they'll continue to grow. But, if he's a low rated value player or a very low player, his work ethic may not help him out at all. He's just pretty much going to suck the whole time he's at the school. And that's one of the things I said jokingly many years ago. I said, a very low player is going to suck for 4 years. A very high player may only suck for 1 or 2 because he's going to evolve. So, and I'm kind of flipping that a little bit more to put more emphasis on the work ethic aspect too, where a low work ethic player is only going to be so good, and a high work ethic player is going to get you some wins. He's going to improve regardless of his potential. It's just a matter of how much. So hopefully that didn't confuse you.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I look forward to my team with its high potential and high work ethic being good after I've left it. It's unfortunate in that sense, but
believe me, there's a couple of us on here that look back at teams we've left and struggled to make them winners into the playoffs, and some other person takes over and they're national champs 8 years in a row. We're like, what the hell? It happens.
I guess I don't want to just keep taking up all your time if there are other people on.
No, there's nobody else on. It's me and you. Personal
right, Q&A. Difference between the rankings, like there's the WIS ones, the coach ones, and the media ones. Why are there 3 different ones? What
Yeah, because the national media in the real world, you remember the days of the UPI, the AP polls, the UPI polls, and the coaches polls. It's fluff.
Okay.
Those rankings do not matter. They're not a true indication. Something else that doesn't matter is the anticipated odds on the game, such as, you're a 6.5 point favorite over this person, doesn't mean jack. One of the things that you'll find out is this game and the ratings that they use for the players and the teams is basically very rudimentary. It's a singular source calculation, and that comes from an individual's overall rating. So let's say you and I both had quarterbacks that we were pursuing, and you look at their rating, overall rating, that's that 3-digit number. And at D3, it's usually around 400, maybe the low 500s. A quarterback may have a 15 athleticism, 28 speed, blah, blah, blah. But at the very end on the far right is his rating. And that's the total of all of his cores, of all of those categories. So that, 497 or 523, whatever the case may be, that is what the computer uses to determine where the recruits fall as far as rankings go. And you'll see it more so when you get to Division I. You'll see the number 1 ranked guy in the nation is, has an 865 rating. He may be a quarterback, but he's got an 865 rating. Let's say you and I are there and he's your quarterback and I got a quarterback, but mine, instead of having an 865 rating, mine has an 800 rating. But my quarterback is better than yours right now, today, and could be in the future, because your totals for your quarterback, he's got a 99 blocking, a 99 tackling, Those don't matter for quarterbacks,
Yeah.
but yet they accumulate as a sum total in the far right hand 3-digit rating. Now, my quarterback may have a 75 strength, 75 game instinct, 75 technique, where yours is running across the board with 20s. But you've got a higher rating. So, what if sports says you've got a better quarterback than me when it comes to looking at them in regards to, the team makeup, if you will. Knowing that, it's easy to understand how What If Sports ranks teams when they come out with the What If Sports ranking, the coaches ranking, whatever the case may be. It is because they use the ratings for the player and not necessarily the rating, the core values that are important for that player for that position. They eliminate that. Now, Gridiron Dynasty doesn't do as much of this. Well, they don't do it, but GD Reports, Bob Hazelwood generated GD Reports many, many, many years ago, and it's a great tool that many of us used. And it's basically a consolidation of him and some others, I believe, that he worked with to generate a good understanding or a mid-level value for the positions. So a quarterback, we're going to say that they have a value with strength, game instinct, technique, athleticism. Defensive linemen, they need to know how to tackle. They need to have strength. They need to have technique. So they kind of weighed those individual categories a little bit higher when it comes to the position roles. And I don't think you have adjustment on position roles at D3 yet. So you've got the generic that comes out of the brain trust that is What If Sports. So once you get to D2, you can assign those position role values to the categories. So you can put more weight. If you want a quarterback that's going to chunk it downfield, you can put more weight and assign more points in that position role to strength. Yeah, if you don't want a quarterback running, don't put anything on the speed.
I know when I was doing the recruiting, because it was fixed in D3, I just put it into Excel and essentially used the formulas for the guest ratings to come up with my own sort of thing.
Yes,
but it's great advice for anyone who's new, because I know a lot of the people who joined with me from my fantasy leagues, they were like, look at this great player I had who was a 500 and something. I'm like, yeah, but that's just the sum of the total. Half those categories aren't going to matter for that position. So,
exactly.
It's an easy trap to fall into if someone hasn't explained it to you. So I think it's good advice for anyone listening.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Excel spreadsheet. That's something I've been using, and a lot of coaches consider that particular document or tool proprietary. I've never shared that with anybody. I should, because then there'd be more people sucking like I do, and I would have a better chance. But there are a variety of tools, and there are some shared spreadsheets out there. I think GD Reports has some that go back a couple of years. You'll hear mention of Yatzer. He had some good stuff. Unfortunately, his program doesn't go through the firewall, if you will, that we have now at Sports Hub. So his recruiting tool kind of got peed on. And Zimney, Ev's got some good stuff out there. His is available too. So I encourage any of the new folks to go out there and seek these things out. If you don't know where they are, just ask. You can post a quick message. Hey, where's this stuff? If you look on the pinned good information for newbies on the forum at the very top, it's one of the first 5, I think. Within that particular thread, I've actually included a breakdown of where some of these things are and provided links to them. So, the coaches that want to get these tools, just look for it there, site mail me, whatever the case may be, and we'll make sure you get them, because they are valuable. They do work. They give you an edge, and it's very beneficial, very easy to use. There is just a bare bit amount of computer knowledge that's needed to work those, but for the most part, it's easy to use. So I encourage everybody to use them.
One of the other tips regarding the forums I'd like to give new people is that there's a lot of great knowledge on the forums. I've spent hours reading this and found a lot of good information. The problem that new people will have to overcome is when you use the search feature, the
Mhm.
default is to search within the last month and nothing comes up. So if
Right.
you don't realize that and go to the advanced search and say for all time, you will find nothing for pretty much all of your searches. So just a tip to anyone who's just searching the forums, make sure you go to the advanced ones.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to get any results.
And going back to get some of those archaic uh, posts and threads about different aspects, do keep in mind that anything back about 3 years or older, some of that information is no longer applicable to the game we have today. Um, some of the more recent um, improvements have been the fact that when you recruit a player, you no longer have to decipher emails to figure out his potential. We worked with, I think it was Sebel, or it may have been Adam when he was a staffer, to where now you've got the green and the yellow and the black and the red colors indicating you're very high, low, whatever. You're welcome. That was one of my pet peeves, that I couldn't easily, quickly see it. And that's something that I had developed myself in my spreadsheet. Not that I shared the spreadsheet, but I shared that suggestion and we made it happen, as well as putting that stuff on the recruiting search. So now when you have it in your summary, you can quickly see the potential levels of those players. That did not used to be there. So some of those things, substitution, um, that's pretty much been the same since day one, as far as being able to manipulate those percentages. Um, your the infamous question of all time is, where does my fullback fall in the depth chart? And for D3, everybody was always asking that as a newbie. Which one of these guys is going to be my fullback? Is it going to be the first running back or the second running back? Well, it's the second running back. That was identified eons ago. Well, with the evolution of the game to where we have these enhanced depth charts, you don't have to worry about that now, because now for running back, you've got running back as a position with a sub position, as I call it. You've got fullback, you've got speed, you've got possession, you've got power, and you've got RB1. So within running back, you have actually 6 sub positions that you can generate a depth chart for, manipulate that depth chart, and then plug those sub positions. They become options in your playbook and your formations. When you go to the formation tab, now you see running back, and that's all you see. Well, for D3, that's it. D2 and above, there's a drop down to where not only can you select running back, but you can select power back, possession back, RB1, speed. So you've got a little bit more control over which of the running backs is doing what. And then where he is in your depth chart for that particular sub position will ensure he gets in the game at the right time for you. So that's a new thing relatively within probably the last 8 years, maybe 9 years, something like that. So the cautionary bit of advice is, don't take what you read 3, 4, 5 years ago and think it's how it is today, and then get pissed off because it's not working for you. It's good. Go back and read all that stuff. That way you've got a foundational premise to build everything else on, so you can see when changes evolve, what those changes are being discussed in the forums, what they're talking about, the way it was versus the way it is. And then it even evolves further from that. So it's good to have that historical background and that understanding of the way the game was to where it is now. But yeah, use that advanced drop down, because there's a ton of information out there.
Yeah, otherwise you literally find nothing. But
Yeah.
what you're mentioning about the different sort of levels of running back that you can choose in D2 and up, it's interesting to me because at first, like I knew that existed. I knew these types of running backs exist in football and all that.
Mhm.
But what's interesting is how, in theory, that might change your recruitment, because when you have no control over other than he's in the game or he's not in pretty much every sub formation, at that point, you're just looking for who's the best guy I can find.
Exactly.
Whereas when you have these individual controls, you can be like, all right, I want someone who's insanely fast. I don't really care if he can block or not in this formation. So go for it.
Exactly. And that's what we were talking about, how much of an impact studs have on your team at D3 versus the formation IQ. And you know, the fact that you can't use sub positions at D3 really tie your hands. You're more of a coach. You're not an offensive coordinator. You don't really get to put your fingers into the offense and, you know, be the puppet master like you can at D2 and above. And it's not just running backs. You know, you've got O linemen, you've got offensive linemen, you've got center guard as one sub, you've got tackle as another, you've got OL1, OL2, you know, and same for defensive linemen. You've got defensive linemen, defensive end, defensive tackle, DL1, DL2. All of those options are available for every position. You know, your DBs are spread out for cornerback, safeties, CB1 or DB1, DB2. Your quarterback, you've got a quarterback, you've got a running quarterback, and you've got a QB1. So those are all the sub positions that you can manipulate within the formations that you choose, and then incorporate those various formations into the playbook, and then use your game plan to use the various playbooks. So you can see how one little change of a player in one of those sub positions based on the playing percentage, substitution percentage. You know, if you've got a fullback that's so far ahead of anybody else on your team as a fullback, do you want him in the fullback position as a running back? Absolutely. When you've got a playbook or a formation that has two running backs, do you want one of those to be a fullback? Absolutely. Do you want to use that formation in the playbook if you're going to run it? Absolutely. Where you screw up is when you take that individual who's your fullback and have him at a 95% substitution rate, because he's going to come out after about 3 plays. And Johnny Bag of Donuts, who don't know how to block, is going to be in the game, and he's going to be followed by Jimmy Johnson, who's in the game. So, you know, you can keep those guys on the field when you need them to by adjusting that substitution rate. More importantly, and it's something that I failed to address early on, is the stamina that is a core category, I should say. You know, if you've got a guy who's a stamina of 10, he's going to be a one play and on the bench guy, you know. But if you've got let's say a fullback who's stamina of 85, and you've got him as a substitution rate of 85, or let's say 80%, 90%, he's going to be in the game a lot, because it's going to be a while before that guy gets tired. So those are some of the things that you can look at when you're looking at players to move. And, you know, we're almost at the hour mark, but we can have another discussion another time about how to use position changes to enhance your team, such as, you know, one of my favorites is taking a quarterback who's got a good strength and making him a kicker or punter. Sometimes those guys are better kicker or punters than what's available in your recruiting. And especially if you've got 2 sophomore red shirts for whatever reason, especially if you're just taking over a team, you know, you've got 2 sophomore red shirt quarterbacks that are going to be pretty much the same, or one's head and shoulders above the other, but that other one has got some good core strength and technique. Make him a punter or kicker if you need it. You don't have to recruit one. You save a position, and you save yourself some recruiting money by not being in the battle for a kicker or a punter, which is insane. So those things, taking a tight end, making him a fullback, taking a tight end, making him an offensive lineman, you know, taking a wide receiver and making him a tight end that you're going to throw to. You know, those are all opportunities to manipulate your roster, even during the recruiting process. I recruit wide receivers knowing that I'm going to convert them to a receiving tight end. Or I'll recruit a tight end because I know I'm going to make him a fullback. He may not start this year, but give him time to be a junior, and he's blocking everything.
That's
So,
interesting. I was definitely considering similar things. Like the defensive backs in recruiting looked terrible to me this year.
mhm.
So I started looking at wide receivers. I'm like, maybe I can find some with terrible hands who would make bad receivers. But as long as their speed and game instincts are pretty good, maybe they could convert to corner.
Yeah, especially if they got good tackling qualities. And at D3, you I don't know why. I guess it's just a generic individual at D3. At that level of talent, you'll find wide receivers. I should say more times than not, D3 individuals are viewed as athletes. You really can't pigeonhole them into a particular position. And there's a few out there that you can really manipulate. Now, the game itself won't let you move certain players to certain positions. Like it won't let you take an offensive lineman to a running back. In the good old days, and this carries back to reading some old history in the forums, you could do that. So there was a time, when guys used to take an offensive lineman with 70 strength and 80 technique and make him a quarterback because his arm was twice as good as anybody out there, or make him a fullback because he could block better than any fullback that's listed in the running back that's out there. So those things you can't do anymore. So you can always look to change a person's position, but it's going to limit you to what's available in the drop down box. Once you have changed that individual and he is now in that new position, if you change him into any other position, his cores and work ethic are going to go through the floor. It's a one change opportunity. That's also new. In the past, when they made the change, you couldn't take a running back and make him an offensive lineman. Or let's go the other way, make an offensive lineman a running back. But you could change him to a tight end today, and then 10 minutes later, change him from tight end to running back. And you'd still get a guy that was slow, but he had great strength and great blocking ability. So now you had a major fullback. Well, you can't do that anymore because once you change a player for the rest of his career, if you try to change him again, his value is going to go to crap in a heartbeat. So that's some of the stuff that you need to be aware of. But you can always see what a player is going to be in the change manner because you can hit that change button, select that new position, and it'll show you his change. But until you hit, change position again, it's not saved. So just be careful in that process if you're looking to change some players. But anyway, that's an hour. So that's about what the show runs. Hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully those people tuning into this episode have learned something. And, like I said, maybe next time we'll get some more folks on here, get some more questions. Don't hesitate to come back on. Absolutely get some questions generated. Hit me up via site mail or hit any of the other guys up the same way. They're more than happy to reach out and provide you with some information and, improve the game by improving the players that we have as human coaches. So any parting words?
No, I just wanted to thank you for having me on and just thank you in general for the help you provided. I know no one listening knows this, but you reached out to me just because I posted once on the forum and said, hey, I'm new here. And then you're kind enough to reach out with a message being like, hey, I can answer any questions if you'd like. And you've been very helpful. So I just wanted to say thank you to you for this.
Well, I appreciate that, kudo. And like I said, if we can help others be successful here, it makes the game more enjoyable because I'd rather get beat up by another human than a damn sim. All right. Well, we're gonna call it a night then. Thanks so much for being on the show, brother.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Until next time.